Can we talk about the quiet gaps screens have created? Our kids can build entire digital worlds, but struggle to read the room in the real one. And no, this isn't about demonizing screens. They're not evil, but they are passive. Social skills, executive functioning, those are not passive. They're built, practiced, strengthened. That's why I love social thinking, because this isn't just be nice advice. It teaches kids how social communication actually works, how to notice what others are thinking, manage impulses, join conversations appropriately, and respond instead of react. And here's the part parents don't always realize. It also builds executive functioning, organization, flexible thinking, time management, problem solving. These are classroom survival skills, friendship skills, life skills. If screens have taken some of those practice reps, we can build them back intentionally. Check out social thinking in the show notes, and let's raise kids who can navigate people and not just platforms. All right, y'all. Today's guest is one of those people who makes you stop mid-scroll and go, wait. This is the conversation we should have been having about ADHD kids and screens this whole damn time. Because if you're anything like me, you've probably spent at least one late night Google spiral wondering whether screens are ruining your child's brain, while simultaneously relying on those same screens just to survive making dinner without somebody WWE slamming their sibling into the couch. And that's exactly why I wanted today's guest on the podcast. Today, I'm talking with Dr. Randy Kulman, a clinical psychologist who has spent more than 40 years studying how children learn through play, how technology impacts developing brains, and how our kids experience the digital world differently and more intensely than their peers. He's the founder of LearningWorks for Kids and is currently developing Digitally Nutritious, a nonprofit helping families navigate screens, AI, gaming, and emerging technology in a way that's healthier, more intentional, and honestly, way less shame-filled. And I love Randy's approach because this isn't another screens bad, go outside conversation. This is a nuanced, realistic discussion about ADHD brains, dopamine, play, emotional regulation, executive functioning, and how we raise kids in a world where technology is not going anywhere. We're talking about what digital junk food actually looks like, whether some screen experiences can genuinely help ADHD kids, what happens when play disappears from childhood, and how parents can stop feeling like they're failing every time their child asks for a device. So, grab your emotional support iced coffee, hide in the bathroom if you must, and let's welcome Randy to the mic. Welcome to Chaos and Caffeine, the ADHD parenting podcast where you do not need a degree to understand your kid. I'm Danielle, mom in the trenches who spent years obsessing over how to do this better, so you don't have to learn everything the hard way like I did. Each week, I bring on experts who actually make sense. And then if you want the real story, come hang out with me on Patreon where I break down how it all played out in my house. What worked, what flopped, and what I'm still side-eyeing. Thanks for being here. Randy, welcome to Chaos and Caffeine.
Thank you, Danielle. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to this.
I am looking forward to it. Probably one of the most excitable interviews I've had to date because you put learning into game form, and my son has 1,000 questions for you.
Yeah, kids are often looking for permission to play games.
Yeah. But before we get into all that, do you mind telling our listeners who are new to you a little about you?
Sure. I'll give you the brief origin story, if you will. I'm a child clinical psychologist. My day job is doing neuropsychological evaluations, primarily of kids with ADHD and autism learning disabilities. My interest in some of this work that we'll talk about today comes from way back in my undergraduate days and then my master's level days where I was studying play. I worked under a psychologist by the name of David Elkind, who's very well known for understanding how children's play leads to their learning. And I got super interested in kids' play. When I started working as a professional, I began to realize that kids' play was not the traditional play that Dr. Elkind and everybody else was talking about. Kids' play was starting to be technology play. This is the late 80s, early 1990s, the Nintendo Entertainment System, and I began to say, what's that about? And then I found my patients with ADHD coming to the office, and they could do a lot of stuff on technology. First, it was helping their parents fix their VCRs back then, and learning to use the basic cell phones that the parents had. But then it was that the parents would come in and say, "My kid couldn't have ADHD. You should see him play video games." And this is the early 1990s now, and that got me thinking that there's got to be something there that maybe we could leverage and use to help these kids learn outside of the video game, not just get better at the video game. So that's kind of the old story. I'll fill you in on the newer stuff as we move along.
Okay, I love it. Thank you for sharing that. Before we can dive into your work, I kind of want to start about what are we as parents fundamentally misunderstanding about our kids and technology. And I think you already kind of alluded to it. How can our kids have ADHD when they are so great at video games? What are we not getting right there?
Well, and actually it's interesting. They may not always be so great at video games. Some of the early research suggested that, in fact, a lot of kids with ADHD were not quite as good as their typically developing peers at video games. I'm not sure that the more recent research supports that, but there's some question about them being great at video games. What they're great at doing is focusing and concentrating on video games because it's so different. I mean, part of it is they're multimodal, so there's a lot of things going on, and the kids really love that kind of thing. Another part of it is that, and this I think is actually the biggest part. We'll get to, is that I think a lot of kids playing video games, their experience of it is so different than what it is in other places. They're so fully engaged. They have this sense of flow. I actually have a name for it. I call it engamement. They're engamed, and it feels good. It feels like they're into something big time, and they don't get that experience in a lot of other things. Now, some kids do, and it's fascinating because I'm sure that from your son, and we know from other kids that some kids with ADHD can really focus on reading, which doesn't happen for a lot of kids. Some kids can really focus on sports, but lots of them can really focus on video games and technologies and the interactivity of it. And if I can make a side note, Legos is another thing that oftentimes these kids love, and there's a different quality to that. So that's one part. I think another part is that they don't need to learn the instructions. They don't need to mess it up because by the nature of at least video games, it teaches you what to do. Nowadays, one of the reasons that they focus so much on it is a whole different reason than it was in the 1990s. The algorithms that pull them there if they're not doing video games and they're watching YouTube videos, which is a problem. Maybe we'll discuss it. Maybe we won't. I think the kids, who are playing video games. I mean, many of these kids have time blindness. Well, playing a video game, you just really focus on it. You can do that. Failure. That's a whole other experience too. So, for many kids, they get frustrated. Yes, but if we look at the big picture, one of the things that lots of kids who are playing games and using technology is they know that the way you learn it is to do it, and you are going to make mistakes. They kind of recognize that there. They don't recognize that when it comes to doing their math problems, but they recognize that what goes on there. Another thing is that when you fail in doing these kinds of things, it's typically private. It's not like it is in a classroom. Not everybody's looking at you. So, and then we could look at all the neuroscience issues around dopamine processing and things like that. And I'm not sure that we're at our stage of science where we exactly understand where that's at. But I think that explains some of what goes on in terms of keeping the kids' focus and concentration there.
Whew, I think that's a whole podcast right there that I could dive into. But my brain would not forgive me if I did not ask. You said there is a difference between the hyperfocus in video games and hyperfocus in Legos. Do you mind telling me a little bit about what that is?
Well, this is my theory. Okay, so I don't have a scientific study for this. I believe that with Legos, the tactile piece and the putting things together is really important. That there's that component to it, and the other component to that. This is a little bit. Well, this is actually, I guess, it's still true if I think about it. Because again, I'll go back to the 1990s. Back in the 1990s, if you bought Legos, you bought a big box of blocks. That's what you bought. Now you have to go get a Star Wars thing or a Minecraft thing or whatever the latest movie is. And by the way, then your kids build that, and you have to go buy the next one in the series. So back in the old days, as my parents would say or whatever, is you got a box. Now you get one after another, and one of my favorite questions to kids who tell me how much they love Legos is, when you make a kit, do you play with it? Do you put it on a shelf, or do you take it apart and put it into something else? Very rarely do I hear these kids pull it apart and then make another kind of thing with it. They usually put it on their shelves and do that. But they don't make, if you make a mistake with Lego, so it's tactile, and if you make a mistake, what do? Just correct it. You take the block off, you do it again. So I think that, and you really have to focus. You're really kind of looking at these kinds of things. So I think that it's a different sort of quality. Whereas the video game's coming at you. With the Legos, you're coming at that.
Yeah. One additional side question, if we have time. Tell me about the YouTube videos, because that is the thing in our house currently.
Yeah. Well, okay. So let me take a step back, if I may, in doing this. A very common conversation I have with my patients, and I actually wrote about this I wrote a book called The Gaming Overload Workbook. It's a good book for teenagers and preteens around having kids look at their own technology use. And one of the chapters in the book is a prompt to discuss with their parents about why these games and technologies and YouTube videos are so engaging. And the conversation goes something like this: the people who make these games and technologies are way smarter. And by the way, you have an accent, I do. There's an R in that, smarter, okay? But they're way smarter. Don't take this the wrong way, Danielle, than you and me. Way smarter.
Agreed.
They know how to get us so engaged and so involved in these kinds of things. And the algorithms now that are being developed are even smarter, because they're probably AI. They are AI algorithms, and they can figure us out better than anything else. So
yeah.
When I want to, before I talk about YouTube videos, it's really, we have to recognize that the people who are making these kinds of things just know how to pull us in. And when I say pull us in, I'm not saying pull people with ADHD. I'm saying pull everybody in. It's frightening. It's scary. And in the case of a bunch of slop YouTube videos and junk, it's like, I think it's fine to have a little fun doing it, but that's not what it is. So I think you have to take an approach with those kinds of things where there's some limit setting, because the people who are making them are just pulling us in, and they're pulling kids in, and they are funny, and they are entertaining, and they waste a lot of time. And as much as I have been a proponent for years in the past around using technology to help kids, I don't think those are particularly helpful technologies. Now, it's really helpful when I needed to my wife, she's not here, so she can't hear this, dropped her phone in the toilet or something like that, then put it in rice to dry it out, and then she couldn't charge it. Well, when I wanted to figure out what could I do, I went to a YouTube video, and I found one, and I had one of these little air sprayers, and I sprayed it in the thing, because apparently there's lint or something like that in it, and I kept doing it because she was frustrated. She was going up to the car to charge it on the pad. I said, that's silly. So I did this, and guess what? I learned how to do it. So there's a utility to these things. So probably saying more than you need to hear about YouTube videos in terms of that, but those are good ones.
Yeah. No, I agree. One of the most profound things that I have had said to me on this podcast is I spoke to an ADHD dad, and he said that instead of handing his kid YouTube for 30 minutes while he cooks or showers or cleans, he hands it to him and says, learn how, I think this kid's thing was baseball. He said, learn some stats about baseball. When I come back, I want you to teach those to me. And I was like, I'm doing it all wrong. That was amazing.
Yeah, that's a great idea. That is. And it's interesting that you bring up that part about parents having their kids kind of go on screens when they're busy doing something, they need to do that. And I think that one of the things that I encounter with parents is they feel so guilty about doing it. They kind of feel like shameful, and it's like, this is the wrong thing. And it's not always the wrong thing. I mean, it's the wrong thing if they're doing that for 3 or 4 hours. But if you can spend half an hour, 45 minutes making a healthy, nutritious meal for your younger kids, and they're watching TV or they're playing a video game, and now they've got a healthy meal instead of you putting together, something that's just, not nutritious. I mean, that's okay. I mean, I think parents have to give themselves permission. If you go on a long trip and you got, I don't know, how many kids do you have?
Just the one. He's more than enough.
Okay, so you don't have 2 or 3 kids in the back seat, kind of fighting and arguing, whatever. I mean, parents to go on a long trip to go to visit family, they it's like letting them play with their technologies. Hey, let's have everybody be happy for a while, as long as the kids understand your basic regulations. We have limits. We have, there's this content that's okay. I mean, it's not just the amount of time, by the way. I mean, I'm getting off topic here, but when we talk about games and technology and screen stuff, it's not just the amount of time. It's context matters, not just time. Content matters, not just time.
Yeah, no, that leads perfectly into my next question. Because you talk about technology almost like a nutritional issue, which blew my mind a little. So what does digitally nutritious actually mean for ADHD families?
So if I can, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what Digitally Nutritious is, the name of our new nonprofit. And so we have a website that's just going up. It's not quite ready. I'm hoping that when it's really ready for people to go to, but it's called digitallynutritious.org. And the idea came to me that how can we make digital stuff more nutritious? Now, I'm giving you bits and pieces of my backstory here. I love to eat. I love to cook. I love to garden. Fortunately, I like to exercise, because otherwise I wouldn't fit into the door in my room. So digitally nutritious is only one of many food terms that we have. We talk about having a play diet. We talk about, which is probably something worth talking about. I talk about whole play, which is kind of like whole grains, but whole play. So I'm always thinking about this in terms of that. So digitally nutritious stuff is really stuff that has some value and some benefit. And it's like, and the second part of that is, can we make children's use of screens and technology more nutritious, more healthy? Can we add something to that? Can we take them beyond that? So, for example, one of the ways we make things digitally nutritious, and we talk about that on digitallynutritious.org, is the idea of whole play. If your kid loves their cell phone, they can't put their cell phone down, and and they don't want to go any place with you because they need to have the cell phone. Let's go for a hike. Take some pictures. Make a blog from that. Let's identify some different kinds of flowers and trees. So you've got the technology. Let's do that. So kind of combining technology play with other kinds of play as well is an important thing. So I think that, and you can find things that are more digitally nutritious to begin with, even without any intervention. Playing Minecraft is 1,000 times better than playing Grand Theft Auto, for example. Okay, I mean,
For sure.
I think that if you're 18, play Grand Theft Auto. Every once in a while, I do hear about. I actually have heard one time when playing. It wasn't Grand Theft Auto. It was Call of Duty. I had an 8-year-old come in and they were playing Call of Duty, and I was like, oh, no, you should, I'm telling the mom that's not a good game. He said, well, that's the only time he talks to his father. He and his father play Call of Duty. They were divorced, and he didn't really see his father, but once a week they'd get on and play Call of Duty together for a couple of hours. It's like, okay, I took a deep breath and kind of like kept my mouth shut. But yeah. So but that's also another way to make something digitally nutritious. Having a parent play the game with their kid and talking about it, and kind of then having that as a shared experience. And we sometimes talk about there's a term called joint engagement that Common Sense Media developed, and they talk about how doing things together can really be helpful when it comes to technology.
Yeah. If you're parenting a kiddo with ADHD, you already know the phrase, just take a deep breath, usually lands about as well as the Lego to the heel. That's why I've been loving Moonbird and their kid-friendly version Moonbuddy. Instead of telling our kids to calm down while they're emotionally feral and breathing like tiny caffeinated raccoons, this handheld breathing coach actually guides them through it. It gently expands and contracts in their hands, helping them slow their breathing without staring at another screen. And for ADHD families, that kind of feels revolutionary. And honestly, it's not just for kids, because ADHD parents deserve regulated nervous systems too. Whether you're dealing with stress, anxiety, sleep struggles, or a brain that refuses to turn off, Moonbird can help you slow down and reset. It's screen-free, simple, and surprisingly soothing. Visit moonbird.life and use the code ChaosandCaffeine10 to save 10% on your order. If you are trying to pull your kids away from screens without triggering a full-blown household uprising, I have something that actually works in my house. My son and I are obsessed with the games from Taco Cat Games. We especially love their very popular Taco Cat Goat Cheese Pizza. I am not kidding when I say every family we've given it to comes back saying the same thing. This game is chaos in the best possible way. It's ridiculously easy to learn, the rounds are super fast, and within about 10 minutes, your living room turns into a laugh until you cannot breathe, slap the table competition. And for ADHD brains, it's perfect. Quick feedback, constant engagement, lots of movement, all the things that keep kids actually interested, which is exactly why I love it for our Screens campaign. Games like this create those tiny moments of connection that reset everyone's brain after a long day of school, homework, and way too much dang screen time. So if you're looking for a 10-minute family reset that actually works, check them out at tacocatgames.com or check them out in the show notes, because sometimes the best way to compete with screens is with doing something even more fun. So tell me if I'm wrong. I do not have the problem that a lot of parents have. I am raising your typical ADHD hyperactive boy. So if I say, let's go play basketball or get on the trampoline, I have minimal issues getting him off of a device. But I do give extra time when he is on with friends, because he is an only child and he seems to crave that time. And that's when he gets the most from mom. And he pretty much knows that at this point.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a good example of what I might call whole play. So can I talk about play diet now? Because I think this is kind of a good time to do
Yeah,
this.
sure.
Okay. So one of the constructs that I developed a long time ago, again, going back to my interest in children's play, and I began to say, well, okay, this digital play is a big part of what kids are doing, and it became bigger and bigger and bigger. And I said, well, that's not such a great thing necessarily. It's because it's taking over. This is before cell phones, before social media. It was taking over in the late 1990s and early 2000s. So I began to think about how should we think about this. So I developed this concept called a play diet. And I looked and I went through all the research and data on children's play, and I came up with 5 forms of children's play. That is physical play, social play, creative play, free play, and digital play. And that a healthy and balanced play diet is what's important for kids. And they may vary based upon the family sensitivity, based upon the kids' needs, based upon where they live, and what's going on. But having some of all of those things, I think, is really important, because we know that play leads to learning. That's how it is for kids. And by the way, it's not a bad thing for adults to do as well. I mean, I think for adults to have a healthy play diet makes all the sense in the world. I mean, someone who goes out and exercises and has some other interests. So those are important. And I'm going to make this point now, but remind me if I don't, Danielle, to make it later 3 or 4 more times, which is parents model behavior that kids follow when it comes to technology use, and they have to recognize that. And all the data suggests that parents are on their screens as much as teenagers. They don't want to hear it, but that's what the data. Common Sense Media, by the way, is a great place for people to go learn about this kind of stuff. And this is they do fantastic studies. That's what their studies say. So anyway, a healthy play diet has all those kinds of things. And so what you just described was your child being involved in some social play along with some digital play. And that kind of thing is sitting in your basement playing your video game with your friend who's next door doing that is part of what goes on now. Now, side commentary here. I think a lot of parents are actually to blame for kids doing so much of that kind of thing because we're so overly concerned about safety and security. Kids don't get to run around outside. They don't go outside. I'm not a free range parent kind of person, but I think there's a gulf between what is going on and free range parenting. And like sending your kids outside when they get to be old enough, they can go to I like to think they can go over to the next block. They can do some things and they could be outdoors. The kid that says, "Well, I went outside to play, but no one was there." They're telling you the truth.
Yeah. Something to think about. When you said free play, I giggled inside because one day my son, I had taken his devices and because he had not finished his chore, so it was for a very good reason. And within 10, 15 minutes of me taking his devices, he had completely created a science experiment and was having the time of his life. His chores were still not done. I would like to add that caveat, but he was learning and playing in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah, and kids are super creative, and and that's that. And technology can be super creative too. It's really it shouldn't be the only way that kids are creating these days, but years ago when these kind of technologies were coming out, there was a lot of criticism. It's not going to make people creative. They're not going to be able to do as much. Well, there's some great research, and I'm always blocking on the name of this researcher. She was from Case Western, I believe, and she took videos of kids back in the 1980s and 1990s, and then compared it to videos of kids in the late 2010s. And the 2010 kids were more creative on the videos than the kids before the technology. So I don't think there's any reason that technology can't even enhance that kind of thing, but that shouldn't be the only way. Kids are they're losing track of some of those more natural sorts of things and creative things with their hands and stuff like that, which we really need to help them gather. They're also not very adept, and I'm glad to hear your son is, of saying, okay, I can deal with some boredom. I don't have something, I'll figure out something to do. That's an incredibly powerful skill, and one that I would love to see more kids have. I came up with another construct. I call it entertainment entitlement. That a lot of kids who are growing up nowadays feel like that they need to be entertained nonstop, and they're entitled to it. And if something stops for a while, I'm bored, I need something to do. What are we going to do next? As soon as you finish one thing, you go to the next thing. And I came up with that from two different perspectives of things that do that. One is I sometimes observe parents who think that that's how they have to treat their kids. It's like, I think all the new parenting books say, talk to your kid all the time, pay attention to them all the time, do all this kind of stuff, all this. So there's that stuff, and the kids get used to that. And then there's the technology, which is nonstop. So, both of those things. And, I think that the idea of entertainment entitlement is a really interesting sort of perspective on some kids. Although the converse is something that I'm working on too. I'm going to start, I just started, and I actually thought I put a small post up, but it didn't work, on Substack. I'm starting a Substack, and it's called Screen Raised Kids. And it's essentially about families and helping families look at, are they letting screens raise their kids? Are their kids' community on screens, or is it in their home, or in their church, or in their Boy Scouts, or in their school? Where's their community? A lot of kids now are being raised by screens and communities out there. And if I could take it a couple of steps further, I find myself speculating what's going to happen when every other house has a robot nanny. Who's raising the kids? Now, maybe every other house won't have a robot nanny, but I don't know. So anyway, it's an interesting thing to speculate.
I lean much more to the other parent that you referenced. They call them hover parents, and I'm probably more along those lines than handing my kid off to the nanny.
Good.
There's no balance there for me, Randy. I'm far to the other side.
Well, and what I would say is that's generally accepted to be very good parenting. And what I'm saying to you is that a little bit of autonomy, a little bit of kind of doing those things is going to be good, because at some point your son's gonna go doing those things. And I think that we have begun to lean a little bit more towards that. I mean, and it's all a matter of opinion. Everybody has their own perspective and approaches to that. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's not this. I don't want to say. I don't want to put it into right or wrong, but I think that there's a balancing to that too. And giving your kids the skills to be able to be independent and have some autonomy and that plays a big role, Danielle, when it comes to moderating their own screen time and technology time. Okay, that's where that comes, and that's not to say you can't teach them and train them beforehand.
Yeah, noted. I think that's one of the other things that I would never forgive myself if I didn't dive into with you. We live in a time where everyone is saying just limit screen time, but you kind of have a very different approach. And I think you've already mentioned it once about how you kind of see Minecraft as a way for neurodivergent kiddos to decompress, learn, socialize, and maybe even feel competent.
Mhm.
So, how can we bridge that gap from just take away their screen time to doing it intentionally with boundaries?
Well, that's probably the zillion-dollar question. It really is, how do we balance all these kinds of things? And I think that one way to think about that is that, again, is looking at screen time not as one thing, but as many different things. Okay, and we'll call screen technology time, and of course many kids are encountering all this kind of stuff in school as well. So I think that if we kind of go away from that, we can first start on trying to get our kids to have good content that they use. Okay, and when do we stop doing some of how much do we intervene? So I think we've made a lot of mistakes here in the U.S. over the last 20-25 years around technology. Let me start with social media. Yuck for kids. I mean, it really is destructive. And Jonathan Haidt's anxious generation, I'm sure you've heard about, or if not read it, is pointing those kinds of things out. So it's been a horrible thing for kids, and I think for many adults too. Where's my cell phone? I don't have it here. See, that's a good example. I'm of the generation where I don't. Oh, I do have it. I'm sorry, but I don't even know that I have it. It happens to be here. Okay, but it could be attached to most kids' bodies. And we give them cell phones sometimes at 7 or 8 years old. Are you kidding me? Do you know what's on this cell phone? You want to see wars and people getting killed and all kinds? I mean, forget about pornography and other. I mean, just horrible things going on in the world. It's right here, and the kids have access to that. That part's appalling to me. It really is. And when do you give your kid a cell phone? What kind of cell phone do they? Nowadays we have some other kinds of things, but I mean I'm not sure exactly where that is. So, I think my youngest child got his cell phone when he was about 12 and a half, and it was really, my excuse for it was, well, he had basketball practice. They all play basketball. He had basketball practice, and so he could call me and things like that. But giving kids a cell phone and unfettered use to that is really frightening. So I do see some kinds of games and technology to be fun and terrific for the kids. I mean, playing Minecraft. I mean, think about, people love playing board games, play Monopoly. Play Monopoly, you got one board. Go play Monopoly online, you got 100 boards, and you got all kinds of interesting kinds of things you can do. So there's a lot of value in that, especially when you're doing things with other people. This is one of the questions you had raised earlier. Most of the gaming that kids do these days is social. You're usually doing it with other people. I don't know what the numbers are in 2026 and the percentages of it, but I venture to say it's 60 to 70% of the gaming that kids do these days is social. They're playing with other people, which is a good thing. Or sometimes their language with each other is not such a good thing. And that's a concern too, but that's an opportunity for parents to kind of intervene and to kind of have some awareness. You got a young kid and you hear them doing it, he or she's off the game, and you're going to talk about it, and you'll get another chance. And if you can do that, great. If you can't, it again. So,
Yeah.
there's a lot of these kinds of concerns, and so when I think about this, um, I'm less concerned about saying here's the number. I mean, I would, if you push me to it, I'm going to say that I think that most kids should have, depending upon their age, anywhere between an hour to 2 hours of discretionary recreational screen time a day. Teenagers need a little bit more for communicating. They use their cell phones to communicate. This is what they do. Um,
Mm.
People are using screens now for homework. They do homework half of the time and play a game or get on Instagram the other half of the time, or TikTok, or whatever they're doing. So, but yeah, I mean, I do. I don't think that screen time is all bad. I think that's sort of the message I like to give. And the other part is that we can make it more worthwhile, to make it more nutritious, if you will. One of the things that we haven't really talked about is let's take Minecraft. I mean, so does your son play Minecraft?
He does.
Does he like it?
He loves it.
Okay. So when he's playing Minecraft, if you have a series of questions to ask him, just ask him what he did, but you'll see that underlying effective use and fun use of Minecraft is utilizing a variety of executive functioning skills. I mean, there's no way he's building things without planning. There's no way he's building things without organizing, getting the materials he needs. There's no way he's doing some of these kinds of things without being flexible and adaptable because something didn't work. He's using working memory skills. I mean, but especially those kind of more active executive functioning skills like planning, time management. If you don't get your stuff put away, the Enderman or whatever, some of the other bad guys are going to come get you at nighttime. So
Yeah.
getting the kids to think about that and then seeing how they can apply that to the real world. I call it detect, reflect, connect. Identify the skill you're using in the game, reflect on it, kind of utilize what we call metacognition to kind of think about how it helped you in the game and in the real world, and then connect it to the real world, trying it out in the real world. That's one of those ways to kind of make gaming good. It's one of the ways to make it digitally nutritious, if you will.
See, my son's school is very on top of it because we actually had a homework assignment where that was a few of the questions. Does video games help us prepare for real life?
Mhm.
And we went through and, some silly things like running from chickens or sheep on the game doesn't help us prepare for real life, or hiding from zombies. But he was able to recognize that there is a lot of planning and he is learning some real life skills. But I definitely think we should go back and hit on the executive functions that you just mentioned so that I can show him your brain is learning in these ways.
Yeah, yeah. Our old website, which is still up, called LearningWorksForKids.com, has a lot of that kind of stuff for parents, where they can learn about a lot of popular video games and how, like the Legend of Zelda games and some of the Mario games, that they can think about that, so they can have talking points to kind of get the kids to think about what they're doing. I mean, a lot of kids who probably are less likely to have ADHD kind of recognize some of this stuff on their own. I mean, that's well, you'll find a lot. When I talk to, we have a lot of interns that work in my clinical office, and some of them come to help me with this kind of stuff. And part of what draws them is that they love video games, and they immediately kind of say, yeah, that was a great game, and it really made me think about stuff. And so that there's a lot there. I mean, why couldn't you learn from doing that as opposed to learning from playing Monopoly or getting frustrated when you play baseball? One of the reasons you don't actually, in some ways, is because parents don't get so involved with those games. They don't think about them as learning opportunities. I mean, if your son comes home from a basketball game and he's really sad and down because his team lost, and I'm going to guess that you don't just say, "Oh, too bad." You process it with him, and you kind of help him to think about it and to put it into perspective. Yeah, that's what good parents do. They can do that stuff with screen-based activities as well.
Mm. Randy, I would no lie talk your head off all day, but I know you have much more important things to do than chit chat with me. Before I ask my last question, do you want to tell us a little bit about the new website?
Sure, yeah. So digitallynutritious.org is a it's kind of the next level, if you will, of what we do with LearningWorksForKids.com. LearningWorksForKids.com originally started off as a subscription site, and eventually we realized that what we really needed to do was we really needed to be able to expand it and get it to parents in a different way, and that we were more interested in just helping parents of kids with ADHD and autism learning disabilities identify different games and apps that may be useful for their kids. Give them a little less instruction, but give them a little bit more choice. But we also wanted to address, what's going on in the world of AI, because that's going to be, it's not on the top of the plate right now, but it's going to be. We also wanted to give them some ways to learn about some of the neurotechnologies or digital medicines and digital therapeutics that are out there. I don't know if you've talked about that on any of your shows, but so we wanted to have a kind of a place to do that as well. So that's sort of what we're trying to do. We're trying to put that stuff together. The site is directed to the parents and providers of neurodivergent kids, and we want to help them to learn how to use the technologies. And the other part that we want to do is we'll help them to learn how to manage those technologies, because increasingly, I mean, I've done a dozen, if not more than that, webinars for Attitude Magazine. And when I do those things, and it's usually talking about how games can help kids and blah, blah, blah. As soon as I'm done, I get 10 questions. My kid can't transition. My kid gets irritable. All the problems with games and technology. So we want to provide parents of neurodivergent kids ways to manage this. So we talked about the play diet. We talked a little. I mentioned something about whole play. We talk a lot about finding games that are developmentally appropriate for kids. And then the last thing that we're doing, and I think this is a really fascinating part, is I've taken the habit literature. I dove into all the habit books. I have to look at the titles so I can remember them. Yeah, The Power of Habits by Charles Duhigg, B.J. Fogg's Tiny Habits, Atomic Habits. I mean, there's about 5 or 6 habit books, and I've read them and taken notes. And I said, okay, how am I going to apply this to media and technology and things like that? So some of the stuff that we're trying to give parents are things like, these are the common things. No cell phones at dinner time. Okay, cell phones out of your room at 9 o'clock. The parents, again, a lot of what parents, so that kind of stuff. But also, how do you develop a habit so that, that you're not just always with your cell phone, always that guy, always looking at technology? How can we do that? So we're developing a lot of strategies to help parents come up with simple things. So, my inclination is to say, if we can get a kid to spend 30 minutes less a day with their technology because they're just not grabbing them because that's what they're accustomed to doing, we've really helped these families. So that's one of the things that we're doing. So that's the second part of it. So we're really trying to help to manage and harness technologies for neurodivergent kids.
Okay, Randy, AI is becoming part of childhood, whether we are ready for it or not. For our kids specifically, what excites you about AI, and honestly, what concerns you?
Personally, I'm an adult. I have worked very hard for 50 years. I do all kinds of work and reading and things like that. I use AI to learn more and more and more. Sometimes it helps me organizing my thoughts. Sometimes it edits my work. It helps me to, like, for example, we're doing this website now, and I asked AI to help me develop a plan around how do we get to the point where we can start fundraising and doing that kind of stuff. And it's terrific with that because I don't know anything about that. And so I find learning about new things with AI to be terrific. I am fearful of the relationship issues and the chatbots. I'm part of a couple of committees in the American Psychological Association looking at AI. And I am very fearful around the chatbots as tools for relationship building. I think that it's really kind of scary to me, and more scary for me with the neurodivergent kids. Let's not even talk about the kids with ADHD and autism. Let's just talk about an anxious kid or a depressed kid who feels lonely and isolated, and they just get more comfortable, and this becomes their best and only friend. Okay, so I do have some major concerns about that part of it. Um, I mean, I'm still learning. I'll tell you how I've started to learn. This is a kind of a funny piece to this, and I think most people kind of like raise their eyebrows and they say, "Are you kidding me?" So I have tried to, in order to learn about this, I have tried to dive into the science fiction literature about AI, and particularly about AI that involves relationships between an AI or a robot and people. There's some really good ones about kids. There's like a book called Clara and the Sun is a good one. But I've read probably a couple of dozen books and graphic novels. I like to read graphic novels like kids do. So I read a lot of the same things kids do. So, but it's to give me some ideas about those kinds of things. But I have some real worries about that part. Now, on the other hand, some of the AIs are fantastic. Have you heard of Conmigo?
I don't believe I have.
So do you know the Khan Academy?
Yes.
Okay, so this is an individual tutoring AI tool for kids developed by Salman Khan and his folks there. And I had one of my students working on it and said it was really good. And we're going to have, as we get Digitally Nutritious going more, we'll hopefully be able to hire some more students to do this kind of stuff and give parents specific things about how to do that. But it's like, it's great because it's individualized. All these kids with learning disabilities, it works at their pace and the kids enjoy it. So they can come home from school afterwards and they can work on it for an hour. And it's like, wow. And especially because it doesn't cost that. It costs very little as opposed to hire a tutor for $150 an hour. I don't know what it costs in North Carolina, but it's ridiculous up here.
It is.
So yeah. So there's promise. I like to say there's the peril and promise for these kids. So, yeah.
For my very last question, I would like to know if you could sit down with every overwhelmed ADHD parent for 5 minutes and tell them one thing about raising kids in this digital world, what would you want them to hear?
I'm going to give you a one sentence, nudge your ADHD kids to things that interest them outside of screens. Find that where they don't, just make that happen. Basketball, fantastic. Find that.
That was the perfect ending. Thank you so much for your time today. I have enjoyed this so much.
Well, Danielle, I have enjoyed it too. As you can see, I get all excited and enthusiastic about this. I think about it a lot. Yeah. It's this has been my passion in terms of my work over the last 30 years. I enjoy my client work and I can be very engaged with them, but this is what I do when I'm not at the office, along with my other activities. But it's like this is one of there's a reason I get up at 5:30 in the morning to do this because it engages my brain. So, yeah. Well,
if this episode made you rethink literally everything you thought you knew about ADHD kids and screens, girl, same. Because I think so many of us were raised on this idea that screens are either good or bad. And if our kids struggle with them, we've somehow failed as parents. But what I love about Randy's work is that he brings so much nuance and humanity into this conversation. Our kids are not experiencing technology the same way everybody else is. Their brains seek stimulation differently. They connect differently. They regulate differently. And honestly, most of us parents are trying to navigate an entirely new digital world while fighting our own dopamine battles at the exact same time. What stood out to me most is this idea that the goal isn't perfection, it's intentionality. Not fear, not shame, not throwing the tablet into the nearest body of water after a rough day. Just learning how to build healthier relationships with technology, play, balance, and connection in a world where screens are not disappearing. I also loved hearing Randy talk about play, real play, because ADHD kids don't just need ways to burn energy. They need opportunities to build confidence, problem-solving skills, creativity, emotional regulation, and executive functioning in ways that actually feel good to their brains. If this episode resonated with you, make sure to check out Randy's work in the show notes. And as always, if you're over there trying your best to raise neurodivergent children in a world that feels increasingly loud, fast, overwhelmed, and screen saturated, you are not alone. Be sure to subscribe in the show notes so you don't miss any more of our Screens campaign. While you're there, leave us a comment. I love reading those. Thank you for being here. Thank you for showing up for your kids. And thank you for being a part of the Chaos and Caffeine community. Now, go drink some water, unclench your jaw, and I'll see you next week right here on Chaos and Caffeine. If you're a parent in the neurodivergent world, you already know this. We read labels like it's our second job. We side-eye ingredients, we Google brands at midnight, and we're constantly looking for support options that feel intentional and not sketchy. That's one of the reasons so many families, including my own, trust Mary Ruth Organics. Their supplements come in easy-to-take liquid drops, which honestly matters when pills are a hard no. The flavors are kid-friendly, the formulas are vegan, Clean Label Project certified, and the company itself is a B Corp, which means they actually care about what goes into their products and how they operate. Mary Ruth's doesn't promise miracles, and neither do we. What they offer is thoughtfully made, high-quality supplements that fit into real family routines without added stress. If you're looking for a brand that prioritizes transparency, clean ingredients, and making supplements easier for kids and parents alike, Mary Ruth Organics is one worth checking out. Because supporting our kids starts with choosing products we actually feel good about giving them. Are you tired of being the screen police? The constant negotiation, nagging, and fights over screen time? Girl, it's so exhausting. Two frustrated ADHD parents who experience the problem firsthand have created a solution that actually works. Screen Coach is a time management app that rewards good habits. Kids can earn their screen time by doing activities set by you, chores, homework, even brushing their teeth. You can allocate times for kids to access certain apps only or block all apps. Once it's set up, you can relax. There's no sneaky workarounds. Endorsed by psychologists, Screen Coach enforces those routines that help ADHD kids and parents thrive. They offer a free 30-day trial, and because you're part of the Chaos fam, you can even get a 5% discount after the trial. You can head to myscreencoach.com/chaos or click the link in the description and start building healthy habits for life.